What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. So today I'm bringing to you a meta-analysis for the November 2018 format. Now, YCS London has just come to a close, and there is a lot to talk about from this event. But the main reason I wanted to bring you this analysis is because for the foreseeable future, this is pretty much how our metagame is going to shape up. And if you look at the Forbidden and Limited list, it says we're not going to be receiving a new ban list until no sooner than November 20th, 2018, which means for YCS Pasadena, this is going to be the format that we have to abide by. And unless there's some sort of emergency ban list, I don't think anything's really going to change. But the fact that I'm even having to mention emergency ban list should tell you the state that things are currently in. So before we get into it, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single upload. And if you really love the meta-analysis or any of the content that I produce, then consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member, because it's thanks to the generous support of all of my patrons and YouTube channel members that I'm able to bring you this content on a daily basis. So if you're interested, hit the join button down below or check out the links in the description. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So here is the top 32 from YCS London. YCS London had over 1,600 competitors. I think it's actually now the new record for the largest attendance of an event in London, so that's pretty awesome. And this is your top 32 breakdown. Now, when you look at this, this might look a little bit shocking, and the reason for that should be pretty obvious, and that's because Danger Dark World FTK managed to take up 9 of the top 32 slots. That is utterly ridiculous. Now, if you guys are familiar, Danger Dark World FTK is something that's kind of manifested, you know, prior to YCS Niagara the previous week, but really got its first good showing at YCS Niagara. And only a few people played it, but essentially people caught onto it for YCS London, and now we can see that a lot of the top players were piloting it and managed to get it all the way into the top cut in much larger numbers than we saw at YCS Niagara. And this is kind of the format we're going to be looking at, because this FTK is absolutely degenerate and is something that a lot of people are really worried about moving forward into the format. The FTK essentially is utilizing Cannon Soldier and a loop of Grapha, the Dark World, as well as something like Snow, and basically you're just using Firewall to continuously loop the cards over and over again so that you burn your opponent before they even get a chance to play. And you have all the danger cards in your deck that essentially allow you to just spam the board with monsters, so that even if you're going second and you don't pull off the FTK, you can just summon a ton of really big, powerful monsters that just replace themselves if your opponent doesn't hit them out of their hand with the danger effect. You're going to draw more cards, and you can just fill the grave with a ton of different cards. You've got Allure of Darkness, you've got Beginning of the End, which in this deck is insane because since the danger cards are just like discarding other dark monsters and every card in the deck is dark, you're able to draw 3 cards, not to mention that card is not once per turn, so you're able to just recover so many of your resources. It's a really dumb deck, and a lot of people have just mixed feelings about it in general because it is just so powerful yet so degenerate at the same time. Hand traps don't really do anything against this deck, mainly due to a card like Outer Entity Azathoth. Now, this card had a lot more popularity in the OCG, but the fact that you're able to make it in this deck means that your opponent's not going to be able to use any hand traps for the duration of their turn. So the fact that you have an FTK, but you're also basically shutting down all of your opponent's means to be able to stop the FTK is absolutely monumental and is going to prove to be very problematic. Now, there are some ways to stop the FTK. I mean, Droll Knockbird basically makes it so they can't draw cards, so that's a good way to slow them down. Ghost Reaper is also a pretty good option because you can hit Firewall, and without Firewall, yeah, they can still spam a bunch of monsters on the board, but it's going to be difficult for them to FTK you, so at least the game's a little bit more fair in that regard. But traditional hand traps like Ash Blossom, Ghost Ogre, you know, Ghost Bell, all these other cards, not really going to do a whole lot. So it's something you really have to look out for, especially moving forward into any regionals, or if you're going at YCS Pasadena, because frankly, YCS Pasadena, I feel like is going to be overrun with this FTK, because I feel like what's going to happen is they're going to just have the FTK FTK just lasts one more event, and then right after YCS Pasadena, we're going to get the new ban list, and they're probably, rather than hitting something like Firewall Dragon, they're going to go ahead and hit stuff like, oh, I don't know, Armageddon Knight, or, you know, cards that don't need to be hit, but, you know, it's utterly stupid, and it's something that, unfortunately, we're going to have to deal with in this format for the next few weeks. But what's interesting, though, is when you look beyond the Dark World FTK as best as you can see that Sky Striker had the next highest representation, taking up 25%, or 8 of the top 32 slots. And I told you guys that this was going to happen, especially after YCS Niagara. If you guys remember the pie chart for YCS Niagara, Thunder Dragons had a really high representation, and Sky Striker fell pretty hard. But what happened is, basically, the Sky Striker players had a chance to readjust. They opted to tech out their decks for this Thunder Dragon matchup, and frankly, I think Danger Dark World FTK being a deck probably also helped contribute to Sky Striker doing well, because I think a lot of players that were going to be playing Thunder Dragons might have just completely migrated to playing the Dark World FTK, so just something to keep in mind. The thing is that's really cool about Sky Striker is that it is so flexible and that you can play just a ton of really good tech cards because the deck is so controlling and good at doing what it already does anyway. But if you just incorporate a couple cards, you know, I'm sure they play like Infinite Impermanence, maybe Book of Eclipse, things like that. From the deck profiles I've seen, pretty much went to show that Sky Striker is still an incredibly strong deck. The meta just had to adjust itself for the specific changes that Thunder Dragons and Soul Fusion in general kind of brought to the game. So I'm really not surprised to see that Sky Striker was the next highest represented. I thought it was going to be the highest represented, but I totally just discounted the fact that Dark World FTK was going to be a thing. So that's something that, you know, I didn't see, but, you know, maybe you did, and that's perfectly fine. Next, though, was the fact that we had Altergeist as well as Thunder Dragons taking up 4 of the top 32 slots each. And this is exactly what I was talking about, because if you looked at the overall representation for London, I actually think there was more Altergeist players in the main field than Thunder Dragon players. And that's another thing I thought was going to happen, was the Altergeist players were going to come out in mass, because it has a pretty decent Thunder Dragon matchup, and it has pretty good matchups across the board. But if Thunder Dragons were anticipated to be the strongest deck, then having Altergeist is a pretty solid option. Again, the Danger Dark World FTK did throw this off, but we definitely see a much higher representation of Altergeist in the top cut, and Thunder Dragon definitely fell from its number 1 slot, but it's still hanging in there pretty strong and seemed to do very well. I mean, having 8 or 9 top cut slots at YCS Niagara, dropping only down to 4, still making the top cut, so it's still definitely a deck you have to look out for. But when it comes to Thunder Dragons don't even really stop the FTK, because the danger cards all draw. So basically, Colossus prevents you from being able to add cards from deck to hand, except by drawing. So it just so happens that a card that's designed to stun archetypes basically is completely useless against the FTK that is currently in our format. Makes sense, right? Going beyond that, though, there were some other decks that made the top 32. We had 2 Burning Abyss. I'm not sure if they were both Danger Burning Abyss variants, but I know one of them at the very least was. And again, Burning Abyss still hanging in there pretty strong. I actually think Burning Abyss was the 4th most represented deck in the entire field, which is pretty cool to see. Burning Abyss has pretty solid matchups across the board. I mean, when you look at it in terms of like Sky Striker and your Altergeist and your Thunder Dragon matchups, it's pretty good. Like, Burning Abyss kind of doesn't really have a lot of bad matchups, and just the way the deck functions, I think this was a pretty okay call, and the fact that 2 of them managed to make the top cut just goes to show that Burning Abyss is still going strong. And then you also had some random one-off decks. There was a Gem Knight FTK, so Gem Knight FTK is still around. This is one of my underdog decks that I've talked about in previous videos. That FTK went nowhere. Nightmare Unicorn is still able to shuffle back Gem Knight Master Diamond and just pretty much resummon it out with Gem Knight Fusion to burn for the full FTK, so that hasn't really changed. But honestly, if you're going to be playing an FTK, the Danger Dark World FTK is so much better. It doesn't lose to nearly as much, and honestly, I think it's kind of very similar to Gem Knight FTK in the fact that it summons a ton of big monsters to the board, but the monsters are so much better quality, they have better effects, and the fact that you're locked into a dark attribute means you've got so many better support cards like Allure of Darkness, Beginning of the End, giving you tons of draw power. It just seems like the better FTK, but it was still pretty cool to see that one Gem Knight FTK managed to make the top cut. Then there was also 2 in the other category. I figured out that those were Trickstar, which Trickstar almost won the entire event and frankly should have won. The player who was in the top cut made a few mistakes, unfortunately, because he just got, you know, overzealous and just happened to just not win out. But the Trickstar player was pretty much took second place, and I thought that was awesome to see that a deck that not a lot of people were expecting almost took the entire event. Like I said, I like to root for the underdog. And the last deck in the other category was True Draco. Again, Draco's still hanging in there. It's got some disadvantages, and there are some problems with it now in the current metagame, but we've seen in the past that Draco is able to compete, so it's really no surprise that one managed to sneak in that top cut. Overall, though, moving forward, this is going to be a very dangerous, you know, time, no pun intended, because if you're planning on going to YCS Pasadena, the biggest thing you're going to have to try to figure out is how do you beat the Danger Dark World FTK, and how do you beat it consistently, because I have a really big fear this is just going to completely overwhelm that tournament. Even if you're going to a regional or even your locals, if people just keep catching wind of this and it gets more and more popular, it's just going to keep proliferating, and it's going to be just very problematic and something that's not really going to leave a good taste in the community's mouth, just because it's not fun. I mean, it's just like, it's so bad. We're so sick of these FTK decks sticking around, and again, I just think it's something that from a like community standpoint, it just doesn't really look good. It doesn't get people excited to play the game when there's just this really just strong degenerate FTK deck that you really have to look out for. But guys, that's going to do it for the video. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about this meta analysis. Are you happy with the way this format's shaping up? Are you frustrated? Please let me know down in the comments below. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video helpful, then consider backing me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.